Um, the next speaker's name is Tait Luste. I mean, in thinking how to introduce Tait, I realized I don't know Tait. I know of Tait. I know he's obviously George and Linda's son. In the years, maybe last 10 years, when social media became more, focused, when we started publicizing Symposium events on Facebook and such, I did notice that one of the rare folks who kind of liked something or kind of paid attention was Tait. And that didn't escape me. But I have not spoken to him. He's been maybe at Symposium once. So he remains somebody who's unknown to me in direct contact with, but I know of. So when he recently reached out and expressed desire to come and speak to us about the early Symposium years, not that I'm not always excited about Symposium, I am, but my excitement was like, whoa, like that much higher. So it's one of those things you don't plan for, you maybe don't even dare plan for, that just happens. Sometimes some things in life come to a point where it's just, right for someone to, be in a certain place and be able to share some thoughts. So without any further ado, I just want to say one more thing. So Tait and his wife had 4 kids. I met his second oldest son, Eli. He's here. And my God, I mean, what a wonderful young man. Like, he's almost as tall as Tait. And I had this premonition, time will tell, but he's one of those, one of the 4 kids who's maybe most into the outdoors, through his work or maybe just outside of school, just his passion. And he's asking questions and he wants to know about this, that, and the other. And I had this vision that maybe one day this will be in his hands. So I'll leave him with that. Thank you, Tait.
Really not an expert. Like I've seen quality today, and I'm an amateur, but I'm gonna tell you a few things, and I'm gonna stick to my script here. My son said to me this morning, he said, and this is actually going off script. He said, "Dad, are you gonna wing it?" And because he knows me well, and I said, "No, I've done a lot of writing, and so I'm gonna tell you." So I've not been to a lot of the official symposiums. I had other interests in marriages and children and things, but always knew about the weekend. And sometimes made short visits to the event or brunch. I also did present once with my sister, back in the mid-90s, I believe. But many of you have been, and I saw that. I mean, Dick has been here. There is a picture of him early on. But I've been here for many years. And I'm trying to not get emotional with this because I was a little bit... what this background is. So as I said, my son Eli is here today because of his reading week at University of Ottawa, and expressed an interest in canoeing, and we went on a short trip, him and his siblings, a couple years ago, and it signed up for the email about the symposium and reached out about the event and had a desire to come. And so I reached out to Alex and told him that I would talk about the early days of the symposium. And I will tell you that I did not realize that I would experience such a flood of emotions and memories when trying to write these words down. I must have had around 10 different intros and starts to these words, so forgive me for the rambling meanderings, please. So the first, there you go. Tech is not my, all right. Yeah, it's, my students, I'm a grade 5 teacher, are always saying, "Mr. Luste, this is what you gotta do." And it's just like, okay, yeah, thank you. Yes, so I just pressed it. Okay. So this is the first slide. I don't have a lot of slides, and they're not of the greatest quality. They're ones that my sister, Tia, who's been here a little bit more and been connected a little bit more to the symposium, was able to send to me. But I wanted there to be something for you to look at while I was talking. Let me take you to the beginning. And that is, gosh, I hate this thing. Okay, all right. Yes, okay, thank you, sorry. when talking about the early Symposium, you might think back to the first official one, which I believe was back in 1985, and which I believe was at George Brown College. And I was not there. I was playing at a basketball tournament and turning 16. And my early reflections of the Symposium are those when I was a child younger than 10, maybe even 5. These beginnings were gatherings in the living room of my parents' house, some of which you visited on occasion to buy books or, as a speaker or just chat, where it was at 139 Albany. And I think the Symposium was really just a natural progression of our life at 139. So this first slide is a, there we go. It's interesting that a person grows up and just assumes and views what things are normal. People can grow up in a tent or an apartment or a mansion, and some come to view that as normal. And summers for summer camps and cottages. What was normal to me was canoeing, and canoes were always around. We moved to Toronto back in around 1971, and my dad did everything to connect with canoeing. This slide shows the early dawn river day that my dad and his friend, Bruce Boland, neighborhood friend Bruce Boland, started in the early 70s. So that's our red VW van that was known far and wide to help people move things around, but also it went on canoe trips. And my dad had fashioned the homemade canoe racks and would put a bunch of canoes on. And let me tell you that the early dawn was not as nice as the paddle as it is today. And I remember that my dad would always, it was just on a Sunday in early spring, and my dad would go down the day before to make sure that it was fine, maybe clear some deadfalls that had fallen over the winter or something like that. The water was scheduled to be released from the dam upriver early on. And I remember on one of those scouting trips, he had taken a jar from the kitchen, and it was clean, and got a river sample. And since he worked at the university, he had somebody test it somewhere, and they came back with saying we can't test it, it's too contaminated. It was like a mayonnaise jar or something like that. But I'm sure it would not have come back very clean. It was not a very clean river at the time. I lived in Mississauga, and also remember as an early child in the early 70s doing a family day trip down the Credit River when there was just surrounded by mostly farmland. So very early on, we were doing things like this, and I'm coming to the whole early Symposium. So this is my sister and I, and we were napping. We're around 3, we're twins, and 3 or 4, and we took a few small trips to Killarney or Algonquin, and I think we missed some of the scenery that day. And I think these small family trips were just tune-ups or cool-downs for the longer trips that my dad would do every year. Most early parts of the summer, in May and June, our house would spend a lot of time without my dad, and the pattern had started early. My twin sister and I were born in the winter of 1969 in California, and less than 5 months later, my dad left to go canoeing in Canada's north, leaving my mom for 6 weeks to care for 2 cute but energetic babies in a city that was quite new to her. So the early act of canoeing would always be very important. So, yes, the proverbial canoe trip shot with, the voyageurs with their paddles, yes. So, from an early age, I remember the late spring being a time when friends of my father would come out, and I met one, John Martin, who was a friend of my, was a friend of my father's, and worked with him. They'd come from out of town, sometimes with lots of gear, and stay at our house for a couple days. And the living room would quickly become overrun with camping equipment, and the smell of mink oil would be present as leather straps from Duluth packs would be oiled. The musty smell of unpacked equipment would linger in the living room. The dining room would be completely covered in little sandwich baggies full of food. Later, empty, clear milk bags. Little bits of paper inside the baggies would indicate the meal in the week. So that was such an early, that's a core memory of mine. That's like, I can picture that. It's there. It happened yesterday. Our Volkswagen van would be fully loaded with several canoes on wooden rope racks and gear and hundreds of pounds of food. The back seats, before safety, had been removed, and they were leaving more space for packs and food and something like that, and my dad had put a door laying out flat so people could create a bed of sorts. I'm sure Dick can vouch for me on that. The van and the canoe crew would leave with my dad for parts all over Canada. When we were old enough, we were pressed into service to portion out dry ingredients or juice crystals or Red River cereal or dried fruit. Larger bags contained all the dry ingredients for the reflector oven bread. I remember looking forward to the leftover juice powder when my dad would come home. So, the canoes my father owned spent most of the year resting on brackets at the side of the house, leaving our neighbor very little space to come in outside her side door. She never complained. I know that most of the time there were 3 canoes and 1 kayak, so I don't beat 55 or 7. My parents don't. But they were always there. And early spring was the time that my dad would take the canoes down onto the front lawn and provide yearly maintenance, fixing a thwart, adding more duct tape to the shoulder padding, or adding a carabiner clip or a bungee cord. My mom would have spent winter evenings hunched over her sewing machine, making spray skirts for the canoes, or possibly sewing together some kit for a life jacket, or maybe adding extra material to a pair of pants or shirts to protect my dad from bugs, or maybe a new sleeping bag liner. My sisters and I would be pressed into service to put up tents in the backyard to air out. This picture is the start of the Missinaibi trip my family and I took in 1977. Let's see. So it's the Missinaibi, and we took my newly adopted siblings, and also a grad student. So it's my twin sister Tia, my adopted brother Ron, my father, my mother, and then Andrew Hamoudi, who was a grad student, and then me and my adopted sister. And also on the trip were a university friend and his girlfriend. And my father would invite anybody to become a member of a canoe trip and see if they wanted to be part of the fraternity, of which you all are. So the spring at 139 was getting ready for the trip. The early summer was the trip, when my father was away canoeing and a time when my mom would take Tia and I, and later my adopted sister Debbie, to visit relatives. The fall would come and my dad was home. The gear would be cleaned and then put away. Film would have been sent out to be turned into slides and negatives. Aches would slowly heal. When the slides had been processed and returned, it was time to share the pictures with people who had been on the trip, others interested in the trip, and gathering to talk about future trips. The winter was indeed not dormant. It was, I think, the most enjoyable part of the trip for my dad. The planning and discussions about future trips, and I think this planning was really the start of the symposium. I took my 4 children to Algonquin Park a couple summers ago, and the enjoyment that my son Eli took of the planning reminded me of my dad's and his planning. My dad's planning took several forms. Long, expensive phone calls, back in the day, right beside the phone, because you had a cord. To trippers near and far. Maybe some of you were those people that my dad was calling to find out that had kind of made some connection with somewhere. Purchasing books about the areas that turned out to be a collection. Gathering ideas and information, calling to set up possible canoe partners. I think that the early 139 symposiums were probably just an easier and cheaper way to exchange information about these future trips. And that's kind of what happens here. You get a chance to meet people face to face, talk, and talk about trips. The people that showed up might be friends of friends, or sometimes the names taken from a cairn in the north. My dad would thoroughly research these trips, accumulating a vast network of names and possible trips. My dad went to the extent of purchasing sometimes 1 to 50,000 scale aerial photographs of certain parts of trips. That would not have helped your rescue, maybe. I don't know. So invitations to his canoeing friends, recent canoeing partners, and possible knowledge sharers would be given. These people would show up to 139 with their own slide carousels, and a visual exchange of trips would commence. The month previous to this would see my father going through all of his new slides, laboriously curating them, marking a code of sorts on each side, on each one. The projector screen would be set up between the living room and the dining room, where the sliding doors never really closed and the width of the doorway almost perfect. My father, to show my class. It gets them to know me and my early story. It also shows them a Canada that, as many know in this crowd, few actually see. The looks and questions I get about the students, about the projector, high-tech artifacts, make me feel old and realize how far technology has come. This picture, however, is actually from an earlier trip in 1986 on the Lockhart River in the Northwest Territories, at one of the many falls in the river. Incidentally, I don't believe this trip was ever seen by a symposium, as my father did not realize for half the trip that he had no film in the camera. But my father, myself, at the age of 17, Dick Irwin, who's here, and Walter Lahaza, in front of, I'm not sure which falls. So this is a picture of my dad in the late 90s enjoying the ocean paddling. That's kind of the way he had moved to. The symposium that we have today would not have started or continued if not for my amazing mom. She was the hostess of these early events, making sure that enough food and beverage and clean towels were on hand. Otherwise, I'm sure many visitors would not have returned year after year. We never had enough beds for anyone, or for everyone, but as canoeists, they were all too familiar and comfortable with sleeping bags and sleeping in them on our living room floor. That was a regular image and occurrence in my childhood. So in 1985, the first official symposium outside the walls of 139 took place. In the years previous to this, my dad had started a theme on these slideshows, probably to whet his curiosity and satisfy his curiosity about future trips and areas, as I said, and just to share the love of the experiences. And I feel like that's a theme that we've heard several times about the connections that we are, the sharing of the stories, the oral, the traditions, and so on like that. So several times I've heard today things like, yes, I go with that, I follow that. So in 1985, the symposium was out of the house. This, however, did not mean that the house was quiet, quite the contrary. The symposium weekend would normally mean that we had to use hospitality of our neighbors and nearby relatives to billet people that came by. My mom, my twin sister, and I had birthdays the first week of February, which for some strange reason became the regular weekend of the symposium. These are things that we remember. I think the presenters' brunch on Sundays was a launch out of the need to have a last goodbye meal before the people headed home, and one more last chance to converse with like-minded souls and to exchange information. My sisters and mom would have been busy for a lot of the weekend shopping to get ready for it. The book tables that many of you have enjoyed today and in the past years were a backache and a headache to my mom, sisters, and I, and other family and friends. The weeks leading up to the symposium found my mom driving all around the GTA, picking up books, then labeling them and counting them, and then once again taking over the living room. Many heavy trips of books between the basement and car and the symposium were made. So these last few slides are taken this summer, summer of 2014 by my sister Tia, with Papa on the right, and 3 of his grandkids. So that's Eli, who's now 19, and his 2 cousins, my sister's kids, and then my brother-in-law. I'm happy that my son Eli has shown interest in doing some of the things that his grandfather has so thoroughly enjoyed, and Alex is already pushing him to hold the horn. And I gotta say, Alex, you're doing it well. The horn, yes. Yeah, you gotta, there's a time crunch there, and Alex, he's trying to keep us on, so. So this is, let's see here. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. There. So that's, and the picture of my dad. I think these home slideshows and the planning of the symposiums, and then the symposium itself, were staggered on purpose throughout the year to keep canoeing fires burning in the minds of my father and others like him, and were his true joy in connecting with like-minded canoeing souls. I think that when my dad found canoeing in the early 60s, he realized the importance of sharing his knowledge and the beauty of Canada that few other than the Indigenous knew. And that is why I think he worked so hard to create the symposium, and why I'm happy that Alex and others have continued with it. I know that my son Eli wanted to say a word or two, but I want to thank you for coming. And Alex, I appreciate what you've done.
I am the son of Tait Luste, the grandson of George Luste, and I am not extremely familiar with Symposium, in all honesty. I mean, I remember the early days of, I think we were always stuck behind the book table with Nana. We would just, we'd be there, I would be like, oh, those are nice photos, those are nice pictures.
You will be kind.
Yes, no, and I hope I will, but the Symposium is more than just a day, it's more than just sharing stories, it's a community, and it's greater, and it's only the reason that it keeps bringing people out, and the reason that we're in our 39th year is only because of the love and the appreciation, and because of everyone who continues to come out and continues to support it. So as I get older and as I become more curious, one thing remains, and that is that I wish that I could have had a connection, a stronger connection, and more stories and more knowledge from people such as yourselves, from people like my grandfather, who had such a love for the outdoors, but the love of which I barely got to understand, as I was only in grade 5 when he passed away. So I guess I'll leave it, because I know we have lots of other things to, lots of exciting presentations, and I really do enjoy them all. But if I could leave you with one thing, it's that please share your knowledge, please pass on your stories, because it's so valuable, and the amount of questions that I will never have answers to, the amount of pictures that will forever be lost, you know, and just the love of the outdoors and the greater Canadian landscape, the North American landscape, is something that I will develop throughout my life, that would have been so much easier had certain things not taken place. So I'm starting to ramble, but pass on your stories, pass on your knowledge, talk to people, talk to you if you have children, if you have grandchildren, if you're all mentors in a certain way. So please pass on that information, pass on that knowledge, and thank you so much for coming and listening.
How great it is to have a couple Lusties at the front of the room again. Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing us back to those early days of the Symposium, and to bring us back to the really scientific mind of George's approach, both to paddling and to the Symposium, the meticulousness, you know, the sampling, the testing, the really, really specific. And I think in particular, shout out to Linda, who we know was the heart and soul behind all of it, keeping everyone cool. So, thank you for keeping the heartbeat going.